Hi guys, I hope you're doing well. So today I want to talk a little bit more about technology, in particular headless CMS. So today I'm joined by Norman Graves, our director here at GRM, who's got about 20 years experience in the digital industry, but in particular CMSs. Prior to GRM, Norman used to work for one of the leading vendors at the time, CMS vendors, and today Norman will be able to share some perspective from the CMS side as well as our side. So it seems like the whole CMS world is now moving towards headless CMS. So I wanted to pick your brains to see what's your opinion, what's the headless CMS, and you can tell us a little bit more about it.
Sure. So essentially what a headless CMS is a CMS system that operates as a service rather than as a licensed product. So you don't actually own the license, you lease it or rent it or pay a fee in order to use the CMS on an ongoing basis. From a sort of a commercial perspective or a technical perspective, that's essentially what it is. And it's the reason why it's evolving is that this is a common trend throughout the software industry. Software is generally moving from licensed products that you own onto products that are essentially rented. If you think about Office 365 versus Microsoft Office, for example, that gives you an idea of how that's affecting the more general computer market.
So yeah, Norman, as you mentioned, headless CMS is becoming more popular. So we've seen quite a few different vendors heading towards headless CMS. So it seems this to be a bit of a trend today.
Yes, I think it is that, you know, there is a large element of fashion in software. So you could almost describe it as the fashion to move towards headless CMS. But there are sound underlying economic and technical drivers that are pushing the industry in that direction. If we start by looking at it from a vendor point of view, the problem faced by software vendors, not just CMS vendors, but software in general, is that when you sell a licensed product, you get the revenue and then you kiss goodbye to that customer. In the case of a CMS, probably for about 5 years, which is the average life of a website. So providing software as a service solves that problem to some extent from the vendor's point of view. If you look at products like Salesforce, for example, and the CRM systems, they led the way, as it were, in providing software as a service. And they offered the clients, the end users, advantages, as well as offering the vendors advantages. You didn't have to maintain infrastructure, you didn't have to maintain a lot of technical resources in order to keep the systems up and running. You didn't have to worry about updates, software was updated automatically, and you didn't have as high upfront costs. You spread the cost over the lifetime of ownership. And all of those same arguments apply to headless CMS.
Very interesting, Norman, because what you described there is we've got two sides, you know, vendor side and client side, and thinking about this from the client side, you know, it removes the need to upgrade software, which everybody knows it's expensive. It removes the need from hosting the solution, which is also expensive. But then on the other hand, I believe that they never own the solution themselves because you're just renting it. That's what the SaaS model is.
Effectively, yes. But you know, that carries an advantage. You know, why would you lease a car rather than buy it? Because you don't have the capital to buy the car in the first place. You can afford the monthly payment. So the same considerations can apply.
Okay. So why would then businesses in general benefit of headless CMS? Is it only that the fact that you reduce some of the costs around hosting and maintenance and upgrades, or are there any other benefits for businesses to maybe go down?
There are other benefits, of course. Cost is, it's not so much that at the end of the day, you probably end up paying a comparable cost for comparable capabilities. But the difference in terms of the cost is the upfront cost. You don't have to buy the license in the beginning and amortize it over 5 years. You pay for it on an annual or a monthly or whatever basis. So the cost issue aside, the reasons why, or the technical reasons why, and the vendors tend to promote these as well, of course, but you get the advantage of being able to use the latest technology, the latest and greatest technology. So you'll find, for example, that things like the editing environments in headless CMS systems tend to be better than those of licensed products, much easier to use. But you also get things like an omni-channel presentation, which means that you can develop content once and distribute it among all sorts of different devices like notepads, mobile phones, laptops and the like. And that just almost comes as a freebie for going down this route. You get agility. The systems allow you typically to create things like landing pages within a matter of hours rather than a matter of days or weeks.
So it seems like there's more to it. So it's not just the cost in terms of licensing and maintaining that you're saving, but you're also reducing operational cost because you don't have to.
Yeah, there is a consequential. So it's also about the fact that you can have improved editing environments, for example, means that you have a saving in that you can effectively hand off the ownership of the content to the content owners. Mm-hmm. You reduce the technical overhead. You break the bond, as it were, between the IT department and the marketing department. The marketing people can just get on with it. It's a lot like using Google Docs to create documents or web pages. So it's about de-skilling, if that's not an insult to the marketing department. It's about de-skilling the process of creating and managing content and putting it into the hands of the content owners, which was always the intention of CMS systems. And historically with licensed products, they could only go so far in that direction. Headless CMS offers the opportunity to take that one step further.
Okay, well, that's excellent news for any people, any CMS editors, or any content managers, because back in the day, it used to be something where you've got to be very technical in order to deliver content. Then they swapped it with WYSIWYG Editor, and now we're talking about something simplistic, something similar to.
We used to have a saying in the old days when I first started in this industry, that a web developer was the most expensive copy typist on the planet, and that's still true today. You need to take it away from the developers and put it into the hands of the content owners, and Headless CMS lets you do that.
Great. So Norman, do you see any businesses or any verticals that might benefit of this type of CMS?
The industries that would benefit most are those where they distribute content from to many different channels. So that could be different devices, but it could be also different websites. So, where you have memberships and non-members, where you have employees, non-employees, mm-hmm. where you have different types of users that need to share the same content. It's where the industries are relatively fast moving, where new products are launched frequently, where changes are happening on a regular basis. then there are advantages in going headless. And I think there are certain industries that are inherently conservative who will be reluctant to move in that direction, at least for the time being. And those are typically things like the financial institutions, whose core business demands the highest level of security, and they certainly won't change until it's been demonstrated that it is at least as secure as a traditional CMS type environment. But other than that, almost any industry could benefit from it.
Yeah, I've noticed quite like it's broad in general. So from big brands but down to very small brands as well. It's really unique for each of the brands and how they want to proceed with it. But
Yes,
in general, do you agree it's a good thing, something that people should look into in the near future, maybe?
Oh, definitely. I think the users need to look at the business case, of course, but there's no doubt that there are advantages in going to a headless CMS, and so certainly anybody who's considering a new website or a refurbishment of a website should look at it as an option. Talk to the vendors about the advantages and disadvantages of both licensed and the headless, and then make a decision based on the requirements of the business and the financial considerations. And I think the evidence suggests that an increasing number of users are switching to using headless because they do perceive that there is a technical and a cost advantage in doing so. So I think it's a trend that's going to continue.
Thank you very much, Norman. This seems like a very useful session to me. We learned a lot more now about headless, and I trust that this will help people who've got some questions and interest in headless.
I hope it does. Thank you very much, Ida.